Good afternoon, everybody. Happy belated Father's Day for all the dads out there. Got a couple of things at the top, and then we'll get right at it. As you know, today is World Refugee Day, a day when we pause to reflect upon the indomitable courage and resilience of millions of refugees from across the world. I think you've seen the Secretary's statement, and in honor of World Refugee Day, he'll be attending an interfaith iftar reception this evening at the Al Dulles Area Muslim Society Center in Sterling, Virginia, where he's looking forward to meeting with refugee families and the communities that have so generously welcomed them to the United States. He'll be joined in making remarks and meeting with community leaders by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Special Envoy Angelita Jolie Pitt, a tireless advocate on behalf of refugees. This morning, as I think you know, the Secretary spoke with a group of college students who were visiting the department to participate in our Diplomacy Center's diplomatic simulation on refugees and forced displacement. And this afternoon, before going to the iftar dinner this evening, the Secretary and Special Envoy Jolie Pitt will meet with a group of State Department employees who are themselves former refugees or the sons and daughters of refugees. The United States has been a world leader in sheltering refugees from persecution and danger, welcoming since 1975 more than 3.2 million vulnerable people to our shores. As the President and the Secretary have repeatedly made clear, the United States will continue to safely welcome refugees who want only the peace and security of a life without persecution and physical danger. Also on a scheduling note, I do want to let you know that the Secretary will provide closing remarks tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the 2016 Select USA Summit. I think you know President Obama provided opening remarks earlier today. Select USA is the U.S. government-wide program to promote and facilitate business investments in the United States. This year, nearly 2,400 participants from 65 markets will participate in this summit. 22 chiefs of mission are also leading delegations from their host countries. This year's theme, The Innovation Advantage, highlights American leadership in research and development, entrepreneurship, advanced manufacturing, and other areas. With that, Matt.
Yeah, just before going to something, can I just ask you about that refugee statistic that you gave? You said 3.2 million admitted since 75. Why does the count start at 75?
You know what? I don't know the exact reason for that. That may have been the point at which they started keeping more accurate records. But it's a great question. I'll find out. I don't know why it started in 1975.
There were refugees before 1975.
There were
right?
indeed.
Yes.
I do not know the origin of the
Well,
date.
I'd just be interested to know is why that's the
Well, now
starting
I'd be
point.
interested to know myself.
Okay.
So I'll ask
Well,
the
then
question.
let me know when you
I
find
will
out.
as soon as I find out.
All right, let's start with Syria. Earlier today, in one of the events that you just mentioned, the Secretary told our colleague Abigail that he had read the Dissent Channel memo
Yeah.
and that it looked good to him, or he said something like it's good, and that he was going to meet them. Can you elaborate at all?
Well, I don't know how much more I can.
Well, what does he mean when he said it's good?
I think.
Does that mean he agrees?
Again, I'm limited in what I can talk about in terms of the content of a Dissent Channel message. I think what the Secretary was referring to was that he did read it, and that he found it to be a well-written argument. But I'm not going to talk about the content. And as for meeting with the authors, he has expressed an interest in meeting with at least some of them. I mean, there's a lot of them, so I don't know that we'll be able to pull off a single meeting with each and every one of them there, but he has expressed an interest in talking to them, and we'll do that in due course.
So when you say it was a well-presented argument? Well-written argument?
What I think the Secretary is referring to was that he read the paper and thought that it was well written, that it was good in that regard. I won't talk to the content or his views of the content.
Well, without talking about what the actual content was, when you say it's well written or the argument is a good one, does that mean that he is prepared to, whatever it says, I'm not asking you about content, that he is prepared to make the case for the positions that are articulated in this
Well,
case
two thoughts there.
within
First,
the administration?
two thoughts there. First, as you know, the policy planning staff will be preparing a response as is required. That response is not yet finished, and we don't publicize any more than we publicize the contents of dissent channel messages. We don't publicize the response, but the response is being prepared. As for any espousal of the ideas before, during, or after the fact of them being proffered in a dissent channel message, the secretary very much keeps private his advice and counsel to the president on policy matters, and we're going to respect that.
Well, since this became public last week, you will have noticed numerous articles, numerous reports saying outright and suggesting strongly that, in fact, the secretary agrees with many, if not all, of the points made in this cable. Are you or his comments today not indicative of that?
His comments today, I would not characterize his comments today as being indicative of a full-throated endorsement of the views in this particular dissent channel message. Again, I can't speak to content. What I can tell you is a couple of things. One, obviously, whatever views, advice, and counsel he presents to the president need to remain private, and they will. And so I won't get into that. But then also, as I said on Friday, he has made no bones about the fact that he is not content with the status quo in Syria. We are not content with the status quo in Syria. Too many people are dying. Too many people are being denied basic life-sustaining material, food, water, medicine. And there's been too little progress on the political track. Yeah, but if you also look, but if you also look at what else he said this morning. I mean, I know that Abigail shouted out a question, but if you look at the transcript of what else he had to say to those college students, he talked about how important it is that we continue to work through a transitional governing process in Syria, and that is the best way forward. A political solution is still the preferred path forward.
Right. But when you talk about how you're not, he's not, no one is satisfied with the status quo, this is a bit of what is actually going on the ground in Syria. Clearly no one is. But this isn't a question about the status quo on the situation in Syria. This is a question about the status quo of the policy. So are you not in a position to be able to say that the Secretary is not, that he doesn't like the status quo, the policy status quo, the U.S. policy status quo?
Nobody's happy with the status quo of events on the ground, and that is why,
Yeah, what about the policy?
I'm getting there.
All
That
right.
is why, and I mentioned this Friday, that is why we are discussing other alternatives, other options that may be applied, mindful that the current approach is without question struggling. But as the president said himself, none of those other options, be they military or not in nature, are better than, in terms of the long-term outcome, are going to be better than the political solution we're trying to pursue.
This will be my last one, because I'm just a little. So what you're saying is that his comment, "It's good," refers. Sorry. It's very good. Sorry, it's very good. That refers to how it was put together, like the grammar and the sentence structure, and not the actual content, because that strikes me as being a bit,
No, I'm not saying he was talking about punctuation. I mean,
Oh, okay.
So obviously he read the memo and found it to be a well-crafted argument, well enough that he feels it's worth meeting with the authors. Now, what exactly, did he find in Abigail's shouted out quote, very good? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him about every element of it. And again, I'm not going to talk about the content of
so
it from here.
you're not in a position to say that the "it's very good" means that he is prepared to make those same arguments within as the administration
No, I'm not prepared.
deliberates.
I'm not
Okay.
prepared to say that.
Bahrain?
Sure.
The government has stripped of his nationality the spiritual leader of the Shiite majority population of Bahrain. You've expressed concern about Bahrain's human rights record in the past, but you've also failed to produce a report that I believe was due 20 weeks ago. So reaction to the latest, and will that be included in the report when you finally...
Well, I think hopefully we put out a statement out pretty soon. We're obviously alarmed by today's decision to revoke the citizenship of Shia cleric Sheikh Isa Qasim. We are unaware of any credible evidence to support this action, and that assessment is further supported by the fact that he did not appear to even have the opportunity to challenge the charges against him before the decision was made. So we're going to be following this, obviously, very closely. We're concerned that it'll divert the various parties from the path of reconciliation and dialogue that we believe is necessary for reforms to bring about the kind of peaceful change that's responsive to the aspirations of all the people of Bahrain. As for the question on the report, I can tell you we're still working very, very hard at it. As I am given to understand, we are nearing the end stages here, but I don't have an update for you on when it's going to be submitted. I can tell you, Dave, obviously we're mindful that we're late here, but we're working real hard on it. And I think, not to sound flippant, but it's more important for us to make sure that it's right and that we're comfortable with the text than it is to have it in on a certain date. Although, again, we're very respectful of the deadline. We understand that. We're mindful, and we know we're late, and we're working hard to get it there.
Oh, sorry, it's very late.
Yeah.
But why? Like, I mean, was this because of it was a hard report to do, or because and there's internal organizational issues, or was it? Was there any politics behind why it's taken so long to finish it?
It's late because we're working hard to make sure that it reflects the best assessments here at the State Department, and these things take time, and they sometimes take longer than we'd like them to. Again, we recognize that we're way behind schedule here on this, but I can assure you, because I checked on it myself this morning, that work continues. We believe we're getting near the end game here in terms of completion, and when we have something that we're ready to submit, we will. I don't know day by day for each day that it was late, what was being done on it. I can just tell you that everybody's very mindful that we're delinquent on this, and we're working hard to make it up.
Will it reflect the situation in Bahrain 20 weeks ago, or will it have a chapter involving what happened today?
I don't know. And I don't know that I would want to speak to content right now before it's done anyway. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
On North Korea, Ambassador Sun Kim is traveling to Beijing for the Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And the North Koreans are sending their representative, which means that all six countries from the six-party talks will be represented. Do you anticipate any meetings with the North Korean counterparts?
There'll be no plans to meet with North Korean counterparts.
At all?
No.
Not
no
even in a
plans.
six-party format?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Don't think I can make it more clear than that.
Can we go back just to Bahrain so we get it off really quick?
You really want to know why we're late?
No. I've got a particular interest just in drilling into the issue at hand. I mean, there's been this theme for years now of different events that stoke tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And our policy in the region is between those two powers. And I'm wondering whether there's concern in the department here that this move against this cleric is going to stoke those tensions in a way. Are we worried about that? Do we have anything to say about it?
Well, we're certainly worried about any action in the region that potentially stokes sectarian tensions. Obviously, that we certainly don't want to see that. Mainly, the concern is about it's the concern that I expressed just a minute ago and in my statement is really about Bahrain's success and about Bahrain being able to continue to deliver on the kinds of reforms that are necessary for the Bahraini people. And our concern is that actions like this could potentially set those reforms back, which we don't think is in the best interest of of Bahrain or the Bahraini people.
There was a very positive reaction to this move by the government in Bahrain from Riyadh. The Saudi government applauded it. That seems to be a little bit of a different message from...
I can't speak for the Saudis and how they want to interpret this. I can only speak for our government, and as I said, I think I've laid out exactly our views on this particular action.
Well, actually, funny that while there was a positive reaction from Riyadh, there was a very negative reaction from Iran.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So, I mean, isn't this odd? You find yourself agreeing with the Iranians over the Saudis?
It wasn't
Or
for
is
us.
this now, is this part of the new U.S.-Iranian relationship?
There is no new U.S.-Iranian relationship on larger matters, Matt. I mean, obviously, we worked here hard to get the Iran deal implemented, and as we've said all along, if that leads to better behavior by Iran and openings for other opportunities, certainly we're going to stay open to that idea, just like we have with respect to Syria, and Iran is a member of the ISSG. But I wouldn't read into this particular incident some sort of new refashioned relationship between the United States and Iran, we didn't come down where we did on this to align ourselves with one or another party. Certainly didn't come down on our views on this decision based on sectarian preferences, of which we have none. We came down on this because we believe that that Bahrain, has an obligation.
Some people think it might be Iran.
Bahrain has an obligation internationally to due process and a rule of law and not revoking someone's citizenship, thereby making them stateless without even talking to them about the charges.
Regardless of why you came down on the fact of the matter is you've come down on the same side as the Iranians in this, and there is nothing.
No, we came
per
down on the
se-
side. No, we
Well,
came down on the side.
same side. You came down on the same side, the negative side, on this as the Iranians did. Now, there may be many, 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 many reasons why that is the case, but it is also the case that you're coming down on the same side as them in an atmosphere where you've got the nuclear deal, in an atmosphere where the Secretary seems to be meeting with Foreign Minister Zarif like every other week, and talking now about, as they said in Oslo, as was said there, about things other than the Iranian nuclear deal. So you're saying nothing to see here?
That's what I'm saying.
All right.
Nothing to see here. Except that, obviously, except our genuine, very real concerns about this decision and our concerns about what it could portend for the kinds of reforms that we believe Bahrain needs to continue to make. I mean, we didn't come down on any other side except for the side of due process and international obligations and the kinds of political reforms that we believe are important in Bahrain. And I would point you to, I mean, I don't know what every statement out of Iran was, but there was a couple that I read that were pretty vituperative, which we absolutely would not subscribe to. So whether Iran agrees that in their concerns about this action with us or not, to some degree, is irrelevant when you consider some of the very vitriolic rhetoric that they use to describe their displeasure, which you didn't see in our statement.
No, not true. That may be the first time vituperative has been used from the podium. So
I think it was done appropriately, though.
Well, I'm not saying it was inappropriate. I'm just
Okay.
saying it was unprecedented, perhaps.
Glad to be breaking down barriers every day. Yep. Go ahead.
Back to the meeting in Beijing. The fact, do you have any reaction to the fact that the North Koreans are sending a representative?
No, I mean, that's for the regime to speak to. He's traveling there for these meetings primarily with Chinese officials and to attend what's known as the Track 1.5 Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue. It's a well-established forum, and U.S. government officials have participated regularly over the years. There'd be no reason for us not to go to this. In fact, we have every reason to want to go to it, and I'll let the DPRK speak to, the degree, their reasons for sending a representative.
And obviously, I mean, North Korea is going to be a major topic. Is Ambassador Sun Kim going to be speaking to the Chinese about what the U.S. wants to see from North Korea, given the fact that they will also be attending?
He's going to meet with the Chinese Special Representative for Korean Peninsular Affairs and other Chinese officials. He's also going to meet with the Japanese Director General for Asian and Oceanian, I think that's the way you say that, affairs. And obviously there's going to be plenty of discussion about the situation on the peninsula, as you would expect that they would. Yeah.
NSG and India. You may have noticed that the Chinese government has said that the admission of India to NSG is not even on the agenda at the Seoul plenary. How do you respond to that?
As you know, during Prime Minister Modi's visit, the President welcomed India's application to join the NSG and reaffirmed that India is ready for membership. We continue to call, and nothing's changed about our position, we continue to call on the participating governments of the NSG to support India's application at the plenary session this week in Seoul.
Can I have a follow-up? Other than the public call that you've made, have you had any opportunity to take this up with the Chinese officials at any of your conversations?
This is something that we have, India's application is something we have routinely talked to other NSG participating members. This is not a new topic of discussion that we've had privately with the members. Yeah.
Okinawans. On Sunday, it seems of the southern of the people gathered in Okinawa in one of the biggest demonstrations in 2 decades against the U.S. military base and following the arrest of the American suspect of the murdering local women. So mass Okinawa demonstrations to demand the Marine leave the Okinawa Island and also drop a plan to move the steamer to Henokos. So do you have any comment, and also how does the United States respond their demand?
How do we what?
How does U.S. government respond
to the demonstrations?
Yeah.
Well, we certainly have seen the reports of the demonstrations over the weekend. So a couple of things. One, we reiterate, as we did when it happened, our sincere condolences and deepest regret about this tragedy. As you may have seen, the Defense Secretary and Japanese Defense Minister announced earlier this month we're working with the government of Japan to develop comprehensive measures aimed at strengthening the implementation of the Status of Forces Agreement, otherwise known as SOFA. DoD would have more details on this. And then broadly speaking, well, a couple of more points. One, obviously, we're going to continue to work with local authorities as they investigate and continue to investigate this. And then number two, we're going to continue to work with the government of Japan to move forward with the Futenma replacement facility. Nothing's changed about our policies or our approach on that. Okay?
Sorry, as a follow-up to that. This was one of the largest demonstrations, as my colleague mentioned, and the organizers have said that the approximate figures are around 65,000. That's comparable to the demonstrations in 1995. Do you feel that relations have sort of reached the crisis point as they have in 1995?
Look, we understand the range of emotion here that has gripped so many people there in the wake of this unspeakable crime. At the time, we said we were outraged by it, and we are, and we still are. So we certainly understand the strong feelings that this crime has brought out, and as we do everywhere else around the world, we respect the right of citizens to peacefully gather and to assemble and to protest. They certainly have that right to do that, and they were able to do in this case. And we take those concerns very seriously. Now, to answer your question about, do I think we're at a tipping point? I don't know, and it wouldn't be my place to speculate one way or another whether we are or not. What I can tell you is what I said earlier. We're going to continue to work with local authorities as they investigate this, and we're going to support them in whatever ways possible. The Defense Department is already reviewing now with the Defense Ministry the status of forces agreement, and we'll let that process wear on. And number three, nothing's going to change about our strong commitment to the Japanese people, to our alliance, to our responsibilities and our security commitments inside that alliance, and to continuing to move forward on the Futenma replacement facility. But if you're asking me, do we understand or regard the passions that have arisen out of this murder? Absolutely we do. And we respect the right, for whatever the number is, for Japanese citizens to gather and to express their concerns.
I guess at what point do you see the tensions becoming so exacerbated that you'd have to reconsider the FRF?
I can't possibly answer. That's a great hypothetical that I'm not going to engage in. We are committed to moving forward on the FRF, to our alliance commitments to Japan, and to doing whatever we can to support the investigation of this terrible crime. And as I said, the Defense Department is obviously taking this very seriously by sitting down and being willing to take a look at the status of forces agreement and to see if there needs to be changes in that. I mean, that is not an insincere gesture. It's a serious commitment, and we know to let that process go. But I think that speaks volumes of how seriously we're taking this. Yeah. So
sorry for being late. I wonder if you covered the Bahrain issue. Did you cover?
I
Bahrain?
did.
Okay. All right. Then, with that behind us, could I move on to the Palestinian-Israeli issue?
Sure.
I have a couple of quick questions. Today, the EU ministers have approved the French proposal. I wonder if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, I think I do. But you're going to have to give me a second to find it. We are aware of the EU Foreign Affairs Council welcoming the communique that was issued at the June 3rd ministerial. I would just reiterate that we continue to work closely with key stakeholders in the international community to try and advance our shared goal of a negotiated two-state solution. We're not making any decisions or commitments at this time regarding future efforts, including future efforts undertaken as part of the French initiative. We remain focused on encouraging all sides to take the steps that will allow for meaningful progress.
Now, the Israeli press is reporting, or some sources in the Israeli press are saying, that Secretary Kerry will be meeting Prime Minister Netanyahu sometime soon, I mean, so this week, to discuss other ways or alternatives, basically, to the French proposal. Can you confirm that? Can you give us more information?
What I can tell you is that the Secretary and the Prime Minister are in discussions about a meeting, but I don't have anything on the schedule to announce today.
Are we likely to see such a meeting happen before the end of the week?
I don't know. I don't have any meetings or travel in that regard to announce, and obviously, if and when we do, we'll certainly make it known.
And lastly, on the same issue, there was a meeting between Itzhak Herzog, the head of the Labour Party, and PA President Abbas, where apparently they agreed on like an outline. I don't know how that fits into whatever discussions that are taking place. I wonder if you have any comment on that, whether you could incorporate whatever they have agreed upon to include in any meeting between the Secretary and Mr. Netanyahu, let's say.
Well, on the first part of the question, I don't have any details on that. I mean, I've seen the reports about it as well. This meeting between Mr. Abbas and Mr. Herzog, you have to talk to them and their staffs to confirm the veracity of those reports and what was discussed. I'm just not in a position to speculate.
Well, let me just take this, the last issue, a bit further. You know, some say that neither Abbas nor Herzog are really that consequential to the whole process. Do you agree with that assessment?
I'm not going to characterize, individual relevance here. I mean, President Abbas is the president of the Palestinian Authority. So we continue to have discussions with him, and I suspect those discussions will continue. Look, the main thing is, speaking on behalf of the Secretary, we're still committed to trying to get to a negotiated two-state solution. We still believe that it's possible. And you're going to see, as I've said, you're going to see him continue to work at this for as long as he's Secretary of State. And as he said back in Paris, he's going to keep an open mind. He's going to be willing to listen to all sides. And if there are better ideas out there and things that we can pursue that'll get us closer to that goal, then you're going to see him want to see those things pursued. Okay?
Did you guys have any reaction to this additional, the supplementary funding that was approved for the West Bank settlements for over the weekend?
Yeah, I actually
Yesterday?
put a statement out. I did yesterday. I can't believe you're not sitting around.
Yeah,
waiting
Sunday-
for my statements.
Sunday afternoon. I'm just sitting there, staring at my phone.
Well, if
Waiting
you
for
had
your
been, then you
email.
wouldn't have had to ask that question.
If you've already put something out, then
Okay, I'll let the statement stand. Seems like everybody else got a chance to read it. But you did hear it directly
No,
from
I
me.
mean,
I
you know,
signed
with your
it.
own voice, it sort of gives it an added, you know.
We're aware of the funding package. We're looking into further details. Our position on settlement activity remains clear and consistent. We strongly oppose all settlement activity which is corrosive to the cause of peace. We continue to look to both sides to demonstrate with actions and policies a genuine commitment to a two-state solution, and actions such as these, we believe, does exactly the opposite.
wait, but this isn't for settlement activity per se. This was not to expand or build new homes.
It's approving more than like
Yeah.
$18 million for settlements. It's approving funding for settlements.
But not for building them, it's for like helping businesses and
But
security.
it still runs counter to our view about settlement activity, period.
So adding security to settlements is the same as settlement
As I said,
activity?
we're aware of this funding package and we're still looking into it for details. But settlement activity, as we've said, nothing has changed about our
So
concerns about that.
any money that goes into anything in a West Bank settlement is bad according to you guys?
I didn't say that. I said we are
Okay.
aware of this funding
All right.
package and we're looking into the details.
Okay.
Well, the worry here by the Palestinian is that these kind of steps make annexation of the West Bank all but a foregone conclusion. And they say that, you know, some of this money is basically geared to encourage, let's say, tourism and expand tourist projects and so on in the occupied West Bank, in the settlements and so on. Well, what do you say to that?
As I said in my statement and just a few minutes ago, we're looking into what this funding package really means. And I think I'm going to leave it there for right now.
Can I ask you a couple brief ones on Iran?
Yes.
You've seen this report this morning about these particles, uranium that was found
Yeah.
at Parchin. What do you make of that? And does it give you any pause about whether or not the question of question of PMDs was in fact really resolved by the IAEA?
Well, there's a lot there. So let me parcel this out as best I can. We fully support the December report by the agency on Iran's past nuclear activities, which echoed our own long-standing assessment about Iran's pre-2003 weaponization work and assessed that weaponization activities took place. So there's nothing new here. I mean, we already had made our determination about past work. And in that report, back in December, it says right in a quote from it, the results identified two particles that appear to be chemically man-modified, particles of natural uranium. This small number of particles with such elemental composition and morphology is not sufficient to indicate a connection with the use of nuclear material. So while the particles appeared to be man-made, as the Director General reported, their own analysis could not conclusively establish this as fact. Thus, the nature of the report precludes treating them as technical evidence. We support that IAEA conclusion then, and we still do. The existence of these particles would be consistent with our understanding of what we believed about Iran's past weapons program, but by themselves don't definitively prove anything.
Right, but that's what you believe, not what the IAEA believes, right? So, the argument has been made that the discovery of this, while it may not prove, as you said, some kind of nefarious activity, wouldn't it make sense to, go back and wouldn't it be cause for doing some more checking to see what exactly was going on there? If you are truly interested in finding out what the extent of the program was?
But we had already made our conclusions about what had been going on
But
there.
what your conclusion, and
I mean, you could maybe address that question to the agency, and maybe they would want to
I'm
take that
talking
on.
about
But
from the
we
US
are
government.
comfortable.
So the U.S. government isn't curious, or wasn't curious at the time, about what the discovery of these particles actually meant.
We believe that the existence of them, as I said, are consistent with what our own understanding was of what we believed to be Iran's past weapons program. I mean, they reaffirm what we had already said we thought was going on.
Okay, and so there was no interest in going beyond that to find out exactly what was going on there?
In terms of the United States, again,
Yeah. I understand in terms of the IAEA, they closed it, but
They
did it
closed it.
because, yeah, but they did it because you essentially allowed them to. You and
I don't know that I would-
the other members of the.
I don't know
of the-
that I would
of the-
characterize it
of the
as
P5+1.
allowing them to do that, Matt. But we're comfortable that the existence of these particles, again, reaffirms what we already believed to be the case.
All right, but you don't find it to be any alarming? You don't find it to be of more concern than the non-concern that you apparently had in December because it comported with what you
No.
had thought was going on?
As a matter of fact, I mean, more important than the two articles was the agency's thorough discussion in the report of technology and structures uncovered by the investigation, which appear relevant to a former nuclear weapons program, and in some cases appear relevant to little else. So the report reaffirmed our view that the agency is a highly skilled professional institution and is well positioned to carry out its monitoring and verification responsibilities.
Well, yeah, but you still don't know exactly what was going on there.
We believe we know.
Exactly what was going
We
on.
believe we've already made our statement in our case about
All right.
past military program.
Secondly, has there been any, as you know, well, I was gone last week, so I don't know, this Boeing sale, have you had anything to say about that, or do you have anything more now that it looks like it's for 100
I'm
planes?
not at liberty to talk about it in any great detail. Last week I just addressed that this was something that Boeing needed to speak to.
And then, have you guys ever, I mean, 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, I think, when I first asked about this, have you guys have decided yet whether the S-300 sale is
I'm not aware
sanctionable?
that there's been a final determination, and obviously our position.
Is anyone actually looking at this? To make a determination?
We've made our concerns known about
Yes,
this
the
potential
Russians, but
sale, and we are still examining what the repercussions would be on our end of that.
And how long?
So
is
the
it-
answer is yes, we are.
By the
actively-
time, yeah, but I mean, this thing is going to be up and operational it looks like, by the time you guys ever get around to finding out whether or not it violates U.S. law.
Well,
Right?
all I can tell you is we're taking it very seriously, and we're continuing to examine what it would mean for us in terms of the sanctions regime.
All right, last one on Iran. You would have seen probably that they announced that they busted up some huge terrorist plot.
I did see reports of that today.
And given the fact that they appear to have linked this plot to Saudi types, are you concerned at all about, much in the same way about the action by Bahrain, that this will inflame tensions? Or do you suspect that they're correct?
Well, it's difficult to know with great certainty right now. We've certainly spoken before about how a terrorist group like Daesh is a threat to all nations. Beyond that, I'm going to have to let the Iranian authorities speak to the specifics of the arrests that they've made. But clearly, Daesh is a group of great concern and should be of great concern to all nations. But I'm going to let the Iranian authorities speak to it. Yeah.
The Indonesian Navy intercepted a Chinese fishing boat in disputed waters in South China Sea on Friday and detained its crew. And the Chinese accused the Indonesians of using excessive force and injuring one of its crew members. Do you have any comment on that?
I'm going to let the Indonesian authorities speak to their actions in this regard. All I'll say about this is what we've said about other tensions in the South China Sea. We want these issues resolved peaceably, and we want them resolved in accordance with international law. But I'm going to let Indonesia speak to its own actions.
Do you condemn the use of force in this case?
Again, we want the tensions to be reduced. We're not taking a position claims, and I know this isn't necessarily a claims issue, but we do take a position on coercion, and we want the tensions reduced, and we want them done peacefully in accordance with international law. I'm just not going to wade into this particular incident. Okay? Yeah.
Can you clarify the situation for us, what's going on in Fallujah? Because the Iraqi government, I think a spokesman said that it was liberated.
It was what?
It was liberated, suggesting that maybe the whole city or parts of the city or large
Well, I
part
think
of the city. Could you
our own
just-
ambassador spoke a little bit about it today in a statement and congratulated the Iraqi security forces on the successes that they have had in Fallujah, and I think it's beyond dispute that they have had a measure of success inside Fallujah. As I understand it, there's still some fighting going on. That should come as a surprise to no one, particularly the degree to which Daesh has held Fallujah for so long and have been so entrenched. But they have, as I understand it, they certainly have reached the city center and have retaken some government buildings, which is all very, very positive.
Any information that you might share with us on the population? Because they were last week, people were saying, or estimates were suggesting that there's upward of 50,000 people in the city, still remaining in the city. And
Yeah.
they were concerned about their fate as
I don't
Daesh
know-
retreats.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are left in the city. As I understand it, tens of thousands, upwards of, as I understand it, somewhere between 70 and 80,000 people have been able to flee. I don't know what that means in terms of who's left behind. I think estimates of the population of Fallujah was somewhere around 150,000, I think. But that doesn't mean that, there's still 70,000 left. I just don't know. But obviously there are still many innocent Iraqi people that are still in the city. And the Iraqi security forces have, with some coalition support, have done a commendable job trying to provide avenues of escape, safe escape, for many people living in Fallujah to give them a way out, and then to try to work to take as good care as you can of them once they're out. Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody.